Hi, I'm Eliot, the IELTS expert at Magoosh, and I'm looking forward to working with you on this lesson because we're going to be looking at one of the more difficult IELTS Writing Task 1 prompt type, and that's the questions that involve maps. Students write into us all the time asking how to approach IELTS Writing Task 1 map questions. So we're going to look at some tips, and we'll also look at a sample question, putting those tips to use. So let's take a look here. Here's an example of a Task 1 map question. Just remember, you might have a mixture of two different types of visuals in your Task 1 prompts. However, the majority of the time with map questions, you will have two maps to compare. So this is probably the least likely type where they're going to give you a mixture of visuals, but they can surprise you sometime with the IELTS. All right, but anyway, we've got two maps here. Let's just take a quick look at the sample prompt. Okay, we've got our summary sentence up above. The maps below give information about a theme park and planned future changes to the theme park. Okay, so we've got the present day theme park over here, and we're looking at a map of the proposed expansion of the theme park in 5 years' time. All right, so a very common kind of format for IELTS Task 1 map questions here. Okay, now in a moment, we're going to think through how to respond to this particular question. But first, let's look at some tips for map questions. We're going to look at some general tips for thinking about how to analyze map questions. We're also going to just think about what kinds of information you should pull out to report about when you're responding to map visuals for Task 1. Now first, as with all Task 1 prompts, your most important job is to describe the visuals accurately and efficiently. Okay, so remember, for Task 1 responses, you're never supposed to provide your own perspective or analysis, all right? You're simply supposed to report on what you see. So for Task 1, for prompts focusing on maps, this means that you should start by identifying the contents of the maps and determining the purpose of the map comparison. Maps usually demonstrate some kind of change. You're supposed to identify how a place changed from a point in the past to a later point. Okay, so sometimes as we saw in our sample question though, one of the maps will show a proposal for the future. In that case, you need to watch your use of verb tenses. One map might show how things currently are, and the proposal will show how things would look in a different time at some future point. Okay, that would require very different verb tenses than maps that show how things changed in the past. Okay, you need to focus on these things as you identify the contents and the purpose of the maps you're looking at. Like many other types of Task 1 prompts, it can be very helpful to use categorization to your benefit on map questions. Categorizing map features allows you to describe your maps more efficiently because you can avoid repeating yourself. It also helps you fulfill one of the main requirements of Task 1 prompts when you can make comparisons between the visuals you're presented with. We're going to take a look at a sample essay response to the maps we're looking at in this lesson in a moment, okay? So we can think through how we can make comparisons on the two maps we're considering. But first, before we get to the sample response, let's just take a close look at our two maps here, and let's take an inventory. Let's apply these tips and take an inventory of the contents, and then we're going to think through how we could consolidate some of the information, okay? So how we can make some of those comparisons. All right, first, we should note that the map on the left shows us how things currently look at this place called Fun World, okay? The map on the right shows how the park will look in 5 years after an expansion. So, as we noted just a moment ago, our verb tenses must reflect this relationship between the maps, the present day and the future. Okay, so an important key to think through and make sure that your verbs are reflecting the nature of these two maps and when the proposed changes are supposed to occur. All right, then you should take note of the similarities and differences, since the purpose of the second map is to demonstrate how Fun World will look different in 5 years. Okay, so let's look at similarities first. What is the same? Well, we can notice a few simple things. This castle in the middle in particular. Okay, the roller coaster is also unchanged between the two maps. All right. I would also say the pathway that leads up through the park here, it's pretty similar. I guess it's changed a little bit. Some parts of the path have been shortened or removed after the 5-year expansion, but it looks like the basic layout of the park is basically the same, okay, in terms of just how the path is organized and how it culminates in this castle. We've got the roller coaster, these large attractions there really are in the same spot. Okay, but there are, of course, some key differences that we need to consider as well. We will look in detail as we look at the sample response in just a few minutes. We're going to think through all of the things that we should write about, but just to note a few of the major things here. Of course, the significant change is this large parking lot towards the front of the park. Okay, that's a big addition. We've got this huge Splash Valley water park. Okay, that's a major change. It used to just be a swimming pool. Or rather, I should say it is currently a swimming pool, okay, before these changes are made 5 years from now. Okay, so that's another thing that we would certainly want to point out. Okay, and there are some other things, a video game arcade, a food court, all things that are added here in the second map. Okay, again, we're going to look through in detail some of these factors, but these are the things that are going to constitute the details, the things you're reporting about and need to organize in your response. So these are the main contents of the park, and the purpose of the park is to show how things are the same and also changed after a 5-year expansion. Okay, now we also need to think about how to categorize some of the information that we see, some of the changes or some of the differences in the second map. So what do we do with this information? Again, your goal in these task 1 prompts, something that can bring your score way up if you can do this well, is to avoid just listing data, listing details that you notice on the map. You need to organize it in some way. You need to consolidate and create and categorize information in some way in order to get a really great score in task 1. Okay. So what are the categories we can apply to these images? All right, well, in the case of these maps, I think it's quite simple. We've already listed some of the things that are unchanged and some of the things that are changed after the 5-year project, okay? So how about that as an organizing idea? As you'll see in our sample response, that's the approach we take. There are some things that remain the same after the expansion and some things that are changed. Okay, we'll look at that in the sample response in just a moment. But very quickly, before we get to our sample response, just one final important tip that's specific to map questions, okay? It's very important to use directional or spatial language in your response. This is what's going to help you organize your answer, your sentences, and to make sure that you get the best coherence and cohesion score that you can. The organizing information is often going to be locating items in space, locating them on the maps that you've been provided, and using your language to do that identification of where things exist on the maps you're looking at. So you should be writing things in your map responses like, at the front of the park, a parking lot will be added, okay? Or to the rear of the roller coaster, the picnic area will be replaced by the Ferris wheel. All right, these phrases that locate things on the map are really important things to make sure that the details you're providing are as clear as they possibly can be. That's the kind of thing that can really pull up your score on a map question, okay? And again, we're going to see examples of that in just a moment with our sample response. All right, so let's actually do that. Let's think about the question here and then look at a response to the question. Now, since the map is quite large, we'll sort of break it apart. We'll look at the map and then look at a sample paragraph one by one until we finish the essay here, okay? So looking at the prompt, we need to first of all just describe what's here generally. What do these visuals show in very, very general terms? Here's a good first paragraph describing what you see generally. It says, both maps depict the Fun World theme park. The first map shows the Fun World theme park as it currently is. The second map shows a planned expansion of Fun World to be completed 5 years from now. Okay, simply describing and focusing on how what we're looking at is the current state of this theme park, Fun World, and what it's going to look like in 5 years' time. All right, but now we want to move on. We need to provide more details about these maps, okay? After this very general overview explaining what we see in both of the maps that are there, we need to organize the information and the description in some way, okay? Now, we can't just focus on only on what changed in the new expansion. First, we need to establish, well, what exists there now? What's in the current map, the present day map of Fun World, before we get to our description of how things change. So we're going to devote paragraph 2 to describing the first map. It says, in the first map, Fun World is divided by an entrance pathway that leads to the Magic Castle in the rear of the park. To the left of the pathway and castle, there's a picnic area, rear, a roller coaster, middle, and a gift shop and concession stands, front. On the right side of the park is a Ferris wheel, rear, and a park with a pool behind it, middle, and a playground, front. Okay, notice all of this information we're using to locate items, right? To the left of the pathway and castle, in the middle, in the front, in the rear. All of these cues, all of these written clues show how you are organizing information, trying to basically give the reader an image of what's there. Maybe it's helpful to even pretend that the reader can't see the map that you're looking at. You have to describe sort of how things are oriented on the maps as you go. Okay, that's one of the major tips we looked at earlier in the lesson. All right, now we've described what's in the first map. We've given that a thorough description. Now's where we get to the place where we can think through, okay, now I want to describe what's changing, what will be different, what will be the same in 5 years after they do an expansion. So here's where we have to think through how to pull out information, consolidate it, and describe it accurately. So let's look at the third paragraph now. It says, in the map of the expansion, the entrance path, castle, and roller coaster are unchanged. Okay, so we start by organizing our information around what hasn't changed, what stays the same after the expansion, comparing it to the first map. But we're going to devote most of the paragraph to then describing the major differences. But there are other changes. The Ferris wheel will be moved to where the picnic area used to be, and the picnic area will be moved to the right front and combined with the playground. The pool will be turned into a large water park, and the former Ferris wheel area will have an arcade. Finally, at the front of the park, the concession stands and gift shop have been replaced by a mall. And extra parking has been added outside the Fun World entrance. Okay, so our organizing idea here, the way we're consolidating information is to, first of all, think through what is unchanged after the expansion will occur, and then to go on and list the major changes that we notice after the expansion after the planned expansion takes place. Okay, so in this question, pretty straightforward way of organizing the information as we see here in paragraph 3. Okay, now back to our tips. So just reviewing here, your first job, we got to describe the visuals accurately and efficiently. We need to identify the contents are there. If you look in our sample response, we've really covered what exists in the map. We've described all of the details, all of the features that are there. And where possible, we need to categorize, okay? That's what we did when we looked at the things that have not changed after the expansion and the things that did change in our third paragraph, okay? And again, as you notice throughout the response, we use a lot of directional and spatial language to orient the reader to what we're talking about in the image itself. That's something you should definitely do as you respond to map questions, okay? Now, the last thing, and this is true for all Task 1 prompts, you need the vocabulary in order to pull all of this off, okay? So That's why we've included, if you click on the link below this lesson, that will take you to a page where you can find some vocabulary resources for task 1. Go ahead and look at those and use those to help you acquire some of the vocab that will help you respond to these task 1 prompts really well. Okay. We've also got a sample task 1 questions there. You can find a different map question, one that's different from the one we looked at in this lesson. You'll also find a sample response. So you could use that for practice and then go and look at the sample response, compare it to your own, and try to learn how to get some ideas about how to respond to the question. Okay, so go ahead and click through on that link to that page to get some additional resources. Now, before we finish out this lesson, I'm going to put the full sample essay that we looked at in this lesson up on the screen. You could pause your video and take a look at it, read it from beginning to end. I'll only leave it up there for a few seconds before we then finish out the video here. So here is the full sample essay that we looked at in this video. All right, I hope you liked the video. If you want more IELTS writing tips and strategies, check out these videos on the left, and I'll see you in the next lesson.